Mohsin Hamid's The Last White Man review of the book. The review opens with the brief summary of the novel, followed by the critique on title. It then discusses the dominant theme of postcolonialism. The theme of postcolonialism is further divided into 5 major theoretical concepts. Edward Said's Orientalism, Homi K. Bhabha's concept of hybridity, mimicry and ambivalence, Fanon's theory of postcolonialism, racism and identity crisis. Finally, it focuses on the criticism of language used in the novel. Now, to begin with, the brief plot summary of the book. One morning, Anders wakes up and finds himself turned from dark to a brown man. He doesn't believe it first, but later he realizes that it is all real. This shakes him mentally, resulting in his anger coupled with his paranoia. He doesn't want to go out, but his hunger forces him to bring all the necessary stuff along with food. For him, it is all strange outside. After 2 or 3 days, he decides to text his boss at the gym center about his unavailability. His boss rebukes him for this. Afterwards, he calls his girlfriend Una and shares his miserable situation. Una gets aback after seeing him. After having intimacy, Una leaves him and tries her best to calm herself down. Her mother is also obsessed with the pandemic of changeling. Moreover, Anders' father gets shocked and weeps silently when he comes to know about the overnight change of Anders' color. Anders feels threatened as if someone is going to attack him. Anders goes to the gym center. His boss tells him that he would have killed himself if he were in Anders' place. Next day, a dark man who was once white commits suicide out of frustration and guilt. The terror of changeling dominates the town. Amidst this, Una is psychologically unsettled and sees Anders sometimes altogether strange, while other times unchanged. There is chaos in the country. The pale-skinned militants are fighting against dark-skinned people. In a sense, pale-skinned militants hunt for the dark people. Covered from head to toe, Anders hides in his father's house. His father gives him a rifle for safety. Now, Una starts accepting Anders and stands alongside him. 2 militants visit Anders' house and warn Anders to leave as soon as possible. But Anders bravely faces them. Anders himself is shocked seeing his own daring. Una's mother scorns Una for sleeping with dark Anders. To her surprise, Una turns dark when she wakes up in the morning. Furthermore, Una's mother turned dark and she secluded herself for a few months. Following action is, however, after a few weeks, Anders' father dies. Anders misses him and feels his loss. Until now, almost all the people in the town turn dark. Una's mother wants to meet Anders for his father's condolence. She posts their picture on the social media and gets approval from people. The end is that Una marries Anders and now they have a daughter. She is dark and brave. Una's mother often plays with her granddaughter and tells the story of the last whiteness. About the title of the book. It is generally accepted that if you want people to read you, keep the title catchy and so-called controversial at the same time. Only the title can arrest people and produce his hunch. Mohsin Hamid does this so cleverly. However, it will not be a fault to say that don't judge a book by its cover and particular connection to the last white man. The title is certainly debatable. Nevertheless, I, as a subjective reader and after having thoroughly read the novel, interprets the title as opposed to the criticism done by shallow readers or by a critic who just criticizes the book by its cover or its title. Now, the dominant criticism of the novel is that it is all about the eradication of white people and the domination of dark-skinned people. Most white readers argue that nothing is wrong between white and dark men, but the author projects white against dark. So the book is completely anti-white men and about the anarchy of dark men. This is the dominant criticism done by the white people. Now, my argument number one is that here is my point. In the novel, everybody turns dark except Ender's father, who dies as the last white man. In a sense, Ender's father is an eponymous character. He loves Enders before and after the pandemic of changeling. It means nothing is wrong with Enders. More accurately, nothing is wrong with white men. Everything is wrong with dark color. Everyone else who is white hates Enders, but Ender's father. Even Ender's father supports him in all possible ways in his miserable death. If hatred of dark color is the part of collective cultural unconsciousness of white people, why would Ender's father goes against the grain? The answer to this question is, Ender's father is the last white man who accepts and loves his dark-skinned son Anders till death. He knows changeling doesn't change Ender's heart, mind and soul, but just the skin color. Unfortunately, he is the last white man to understand this. Point number two is, the narrative shows that white skin color is defined as socially acceptable and sophisticated, moral, good, central, dominant and intellectual, while dark color man is seen as immoral, bad, unsophisticated, inhuman and savage. It implies that the novel is not about anti-whiteness but about the dark skin in question. It is about the internalized hatred of dark skin color that is purely external. Furthermore, it is about the mutual understanding between white and dark color men, just like the understanding between Anders and his father. His father is the last white man who remains unbiased, who doesn't take the changeling to the level of racism. Look at the cleaning guy at the gym center who doesn't change, although he is already brown. Here, one question can be raised. The pandemic of changeling in the novel is only for white people or for dark people as well. It's only for those who creates difference of color and divide people into us versus them. Now, the research-oriented themes. So, to begin with, first of all is Edward Said's Orientalism. Reading The Last White Man from the perspective of Edward Said's Orientalism. Edward Said's Orientalism is the most appropriate theory to be applied on Mohsin Hamid's The Last White Man. According to Edward Said, there are two dichotomies, Orient and Occident. The Occident encompasses white supremacy and colonizers, while the Orient includes Eastern people means colonized. Now, the Occident has described the Orient as other, cliched and inferior to the European culture. Additionally, anyone other than white is represented as inhuman. The West presumes that the Orient has no sophisticated culture, therefore it is upon them to civilize the Orient. So they represent the Orient in their art. These cultural representations usually depict the Orient as primitive, irrational, violent, despotic, fanatic, and essentially inferior to the Westerner or NATO informant, and hence enlightenment can only occur when traditional and reactionary values are replaced by contemporary and progressive ideas that are either Western or Western influenced. Despite that all the characters in the novel were white once, still after the pandemic of changeling, the personas undergo miserable situations central to the dark skin. Anders has been looked down upon by his own acquaintance. In the novel, dark color is unequivocally associated with evil, inhumanity, fanaticism, and despotism. The following passage spotlights this construct. Uno's mother read of the savagery of the dark people, how it had been in them from the beginning, and had manifested itself again and again throughout the history, and could not be denied. And she read the examples of when groups of white had fallen, and the rapes and slaughters and tortures we had been subjected to, and how that was their way, the way of the dark people, whenever they seized the upper hand. He realized that he had been robbed. I'm talking about Anders. He realized that he had been robbed, that he was the victim of a crime, the horror of which only grew, the crime that had taken everything from him, that had taken him from him. There are many other passages that clearly show the binary representation of us versus them. However, the major problem to investigate is to focus on the self-denial of the white people's own body and its acceptance as a resilience at the same time. So, apply the theory and go on with innovative enterprise. Over to the Homi K. Bhabha concept of postcolonialism related to hybridity, mimicry, and ambivalence. Now, almost all the key terms initiated by Homi K. Bhabha in the field of postcolonialism is applicable here. His concept of hybridity, mimicry, and ambivalence are best suited theoretical concept for the data analysis of this novel. I have already touched a bit about it in the first chapter. You can watch the video. Shortly, hybridity occurs when a colonized person adopts two different cultures, but he or she is neither in us group nor in other group. This is what happened in the novel after Anders turns dark. He becomes a terrible victim of dual cultural identity. Initially, he himself neither accepts his new identity nor the white people accept him. He is desperate and uncertain of his new identity, and he realizes as if he does not belong, he who has been born here. Furthermore, Anders could feel that the mood of his town changes so rapidly that the pandemic of color change. Then the pandemic of color change. The worst case scenario is that Anders knows the hostility towards dark color because he was once a white man. So, there are more relevant data about hybridity in the novel you just need to highlight. Mimicry and ambivalence. Mimicry leads to ambivalence. The colonized people start mimicking the colonizer, which results in his ambivalence. Ambivalence is a psychological duplicity of a victim struggling from genuine self. This again leads to identity crisis. Enders mimics other. Their talk, movement of lips and their gestures, postures, so that to reassure other, and most importantly to reassure himself that he is the part of them, that he is not other. So he adopts the behavior of other, but his body is far away from his mind, because his sense of being observed, of being on the outside, that results in his split personality and frustration. The passage shows his duplicity. He began instead to mirror the others around him, to echo the other, to echo the way they spoke and walked and moved, and the way they held their mouths, like they were performing something, and he was trying to perform it too, and what it was he didn't know. Now, ambivalence means the psychological confusion of either this or that. But what happens is neither this nor that. Here is one most important point to make. Enders and his family gradually start accepting their new identity. To resolve this confusion, Homi K. Baba actually believes that mimicry, hybridity, and ambivalence are healthy tools to reach to a stable identity. This is evident in the novel. All the characters ultimately accept their new and stable identities, but nostalgic to their whiteness. Now, over to the reading of The Last White Man from the perspective of Fanon's theory of postcolonialism. We can explore the novel from the perspective of Fanon's theory of postcolonialism. We can either support our argument with Fanon's Black Skin, White Mask, or his another book, The Wretched of the Earth. The central idea of Fanon's Black Skin, White Mask is that, according to Fanon, there are two categories of violence. The first one is the violence of the colonizers through annihilation of body, psyche, culture, along with the demarcation of space. The second category is the violence of the colonized. The colonized people do violence is an attempt to retrieve dignity, sense of self, and space through anti-colonial struggle. These two categories of violence are evident in The Last White Man. The pale-skinned militants hunt for the dark-skinned to kill them. They even want Enders to leave soon possible. The most shocking point is that those militants are not strangers but familiar to Enders. This shows the intensity of hatred of skin color other than white. Here comes the utility of second category of violence. Violence by the colonized. Look at Enders in the novel. He has a rifle for safety. Other dark people stand for themselves to survive. Furthermore, I would like to use the term phobogenic, used by Fanon. It means that a thing or person that elicits irrational feelings of dread, fear, and hate in a subject, and whose threat is often exaggerated. In the context of race, Fanon postulates that the black person is a phobogenic object, sparking anxiety in the eyes of white subjects. All this discussion is so relevant to the investigation of research problem of racism in the novel. Coming over to the uh, Fanon, the wretched of the earth. We can also explore the novel through this lens. However, it will not be an exaggeration to say that Fanon's black skin, white mask is the most relevant theory to investigate the issue of racism in the given novel. If you want to relate the theoretical arguments from the wretched of the earth to the last white man, you can. I'm here to discuss what seems to me is apparently relevant and researchable. Over to the theme of racism, the clash of color. Mohsin Hamid draws our attention to the clash of skin color rather than to the clash of civilization. The novel highlights that it is only and only skin color that is central to racism. Like in racism, there are other features like caste, language, culture, and creed, but the most important external factor of racism is skin color. All the other features of racism are secondary to the skin color. Above all the characters are well aware of the pandemic of changeling, still they had a person having dark skin. The question is why? One of the answers is that it is an imaginative construct of Western people. Hypersensitivity to the color other than white. Being dark means inhuman, uncivilized, animal, and thus a savage. Therefore, the white man shoots himself. And above all, he is assumed to be an intruder who is shot by a white man. This shows that the peak of racial discrimination based on color. Now, it is getting hard for Ender to decide whether to be or not to be. He is torn between personal and cultural identity. Under the brown skin, he is the white Enders, but people around him are white, thus define him on the basis of his external complexion. This kind of analysis can be supported by mashing up psychology with culture study. This is how society moves one and how personal psychological states struggles with those very social decorums. This common topic illustrates postcolonial criticism, recognition of the close relationship between psychology and ideology, or more specifically between individual identity and cultural belief. This novel can be explored in light of this perspective as well. Over to the identity crisis. The most easy to investigate is the problem of identity crisis in any novel. Mohsin Hamid, The Last White Man, spotlights the core issue of identity crisis of dark people. Beginning with Ender's hatred of his new identity and finishing the novel with the whole new dark communities accepting of that new identity, Mohsin Hamid draws our attention to the very problem of dark skin. It is the dark color that is responsible for many other social issues. However, Erik Erikson is the first one comes to the mind whenever we talk about identity crisis. He has coined the term. Broadly speaking, identity crisis means questioning oneself's identity and cultural identity. The victim cannot decide who he or she is. That originates when there is a problem in one's culture, within cultural problem or language, color, dress, race, ritual, etc. Here we are dealing only with the problem of dark color. In the novel, Ender splits between white and dark color identities. He knows that he is white inside, but he also knows that what the social status of dark people is. Every bad and evil things are associated with the dark skin. After turning dark, the same Enders, once white, no longer remain as social, civilized, and familiar. You can apply all the 8 stages developed by Erik Erikson on the character of Enders. Over to the use of language. One of the wow facts about the novel is its complexity of language. One paragraph is one sentence. One sentence has one paragraph. It is very difficult for the beginner to go through the narrative. It is jumbled up narrative. It is not that one thought follows another thought, but one thought is interrupted by another. Therefore, we can say that the novel has mixed narrative. Moreover, all the characters are in constant flux. They think about everything all at once. Some are paranoid, others are hysterical. Therefore, Mohsin Hamid asserts about the character stream of unconsciousness is the innocence of flux. It means what a character thinks shows sympathy. The characters cover every bit of prospect with the mashup of thoughts that seems very innocent. Lastly, the language of the novel is symbolic and cacophonic. It can be explored from the angle of semiotic. Thank you very much.